Governor Schwarzenegger, terminating fossil fuels is also one of your key messages, short-term, medium-term maybe. How do we do that? What is the best way of going about it? Not whining, that much we understood. Is it incentives, limits, taxes? What's your message?
Well, I think that I agree with everything that Tony said. It's very thoughtful. And I would just add that it is very important to recognize that we need to win the people over. Because without the people understanding the issue, we cannot get them behind the movement. We have to create a people's movement. And it's no different than the fitness movement. When I was promoting fitness in the 70s, people had no interest in bodybuilding because they thought it is about a guy that stands on stage and is oiled up and is shaking up there and is doing a pose. And they thought that was it. And I was talking more about that everyone should be working out with weights. It doesn't matter which sport you do, and it's healthy and it makes you fit and so on. And so when I hired a publicist to promote bodybuilding, he said to me, he says, you got to change the word bodybuilding. Can't go around and say to people they should do bodybuilding because they think that you're standing on stage oiled up. And that's not what most of the people want. He says, I said, so what do you think? I said, he said, you should call it maybe resistance training. And then I said, okay, let's go and talk about resistance training. The more I talked about resistance training, the more people found it fascinating. And all the talk shows had me come on and show how to exercise with a woman together with some other guy and to show resistance training. And all of a sudden, the whole thing started getting to become very popular. And in the 80s, all of a sudden, it was a huge explosion. And now, when you look back and when you look at it, we have a gymnasium in every hotel in the world. We have a weight room in every military base. Every fire station has a weight room. Every police station, every university, every high school, every sports team. Everyone is working out. And it's all because we changed the language and we made it more clear of what it is. And the same has to happen with the pollution. We can't go around and say this is climate change because no one understands what the hell we are talking about. When you go down on Fifth Avenue in New York and you will ask 100 people, give me a definition of climate change, you will hear 100 different answers. So that means that you're not having these people on board. So what I'm saying is that we should just find a word and study this issue. We in California were successful, for instance, by using the word terminating pollution. Because everyone understood pollution. Because Ronald Reagan was a Republican who created the Air Resources Board in California, which was the board that we used in order to accomplish all of our goals. It's an independent board. So the legislators pass the law, the governor signs it, and then it goes to the Air Resources Board. And so, but he never talked about climate change, Ronald Reagan. He created the Air Resources Board by saying, Nancy and I, we hate the pollution. We have tears in our eyes in the morning when we get up, and it's unacceptable. We can do better than that. And President Nixon, right after that, when he was president, created the EPA in Washington, the Environmental Protection Agency. Again, under the auspices of, we got to get rid of pollution, not climate change. Climate change is something that environmentalists came up with later on to be cutesy-wootsy. But I mean, it really doesn't do the job because you got to talk about cutting pollution, because climate change is not killing millions of people. It's killing some people because of the fires and the floods and the storms and all of this, but not the millions of people that are dying every year, which is because of pollution.
So we have to learn how to communicate
the right way. So this is why it is important for everyone to communicate and to talk about we got to go and get rid of pollution, rather than talking about climate change and the climate this. I mean, I heard the President of the United States, going on and give a speech, the State of the Union address, it was Biden, and he says, let me talk a little bit about climate. Let me talk a little bit about climate. What are you talking about? Why not just say, let me talk a little bit about how we have to reduce pollution and talk about pollution. That's the enemy. Climate, let's talk about climate. That's the wrong communication. The people in the White House that are writing his speech should be fired immediately for not doing the research. To say to have a president spend 5 minutes on talking about climate, the world is listening, this is the best kind of exposure you can get, rather than talking about pollution. Fossil fuels cause pollution. We got to go and switch out fossil fuels with renewable energy so that we can breathe. And we in California showed a commercial to the people on television. It was of a child which was given to us by the American Lung Association, of a child with an inhaler. And then eventually passing out. This is what we do to our children because of pollution. That's what the ad said. I tell you, the numbers changed immediately, and everything from then on that I wanted, that people voted for it. So this is what I'm talking about. We got to go and think about the communication rather than the technical aspect alone. The technical aspect is very important, but we got to also talk about how do we communicate.
How to get it across to the people. We've just got very little time here, but I'd like to talk about, you're a great communicator. I'd like to talk about your recent book on leadership, which has come out last year. It has now also come out in German. Why did you write it, and what would you recommend to today's political leaders?
Just before I answer, I can't resist. I mean, Arnold's absolutely right. It's got to be a people's issue. And when he was talking about when he started with the bodybuilding, I remember sitting with my wife watching one of the films. Was maybe Conan? Is it? Which is the one?
Yeah, Conan, maybe.
Yeah, Conan,
Yeah.
maybe. And my wife's looking at the screen. She says, "You've got to look more like that," she says. So I take his advice. Right, I'm getting in the gym. About 2 weeks later, I say, "Okay, darling, come on." She says, "You got to get back in there again." So I'm afraid I never ended up looking like you, but it's yeah, you can't get everything in life. Yeah, no, I wrote the book on leadership so that other people profit from my mistakes. I always think, you learn more from your mistakes than you ever do from your successes. And one of the things which is relevant to this issue is it's a great thing to be an activist on an issue. But the question is when you can turn the activism, the campaigning, into the practical policy solution. And if there's any lesson for today's leader on the climate issue, it is, in the end, you've got to go deep to be able to get the solutions that are really going to work. And you've got to understand that ultimately, leadership, and I say this in the book, and it's a very strange thing to say. When I said this first, people thought, I don't know, he's talking about being out of office too long. I said, the job of a leader in a democracy is not to give people what they want. They're like, what do you mean it's not to give people what they want? And I say, no, the job of a leader in a democracy is to ask what people need and then persuade them that it is what they want, right? And in the end, people do want a pollution-free world. They want that. And the job of the leader is to persuade them that what they want can be achieved also by what they need, which are the practical policy solutions to get there. And that we're not asking people to go and sacrifice their lives. We're actually asking people to come together in pursuit of a solution that will change their lives and change their lives for the better. And there's one other thing that I learned all my political life, which is, in the end, today, it doesn't matter how big your country is, how powerful your country is. ultimately, there are problems that the world has got to solve together. So whatever the geopolitical differences, whatever the disputes are, whatever the differences of ideology and ideas and leadership and tensions, in the end, on some issues, the world has to work together. And this is an issue where we have to ensure that those big major countries that are coming up through the developing world are in dialogue with the major countries in the developed world. And even at the smallest country level, people are in dialogue together so that you can solve this problem together, because it won't be solved by any one country. It's got to be solved by people uniting in action. And the reason why this conference is so important is because the basic message, which is to unite in action, carries the two essential elements for success: unity and doing rather than saying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful final words. Fascinating to listen to you. I could go on forever, but we are running out of time. Thank you so much, and a big round of applause
Thank you very much.
for the governor. Thank you, and for Dr. Mayer. Thank you so much.